Okay, the title of this sermon is The Big Lies and Trumpets. The Big Lies and Trumpets. We all know that the trumpet will be blasted by the angels at the last trump, the second coming of Christ, and he will smash the evil governments, and truth will reign, goodness will reign, and the world will be changed. And I always think predators and parasites will be done away, and it'll all be, the desert will bloom like a rose. We all know those scriptures. And our hero will save the world from evil. But not just from evil governments, he'll save the world from the big lies. And I want to focus this afternoon on the big lies and deception. The big lies and deception. Because big lies and deceptions oil the pathway for evil behavior. Lies cause people to feel justified in mistreating other people and other evil things. And in some ways, people are like sheep. You feed them lies and you can mislead them to do bad things. And people are deceived to believe the big lies. And they participate in evil because of it. I'm just going to mention a few things. By the way, in Russia, eventually the Russian people realized they pay us very little to work, and we work very little for the little pay. You know, they joked about how bad communism was. One of their jokes was that Pravda, which in Russian means truth, they said, "There's no truth in the news, and there's no news in the truth." That's how bad it was. Do you realize, as you watch the mainstream media in America, you start feeling like the Russians did? There's no truth in the news, and there's no news. Anyway, and the truth, Americans. By the way, Orwellian labels in George Orwell's book, they create this giant socialist state, and everything was a lie. And they watch people through their TV sets. They're monitoring everybody's behavior. As much as we might have laughed at that book, 1984, actually the government now with smartphones can sort of monitor you. They listen to you. The joke is, now this is a bad joke, if you don't want Alexis to listen to what you're saying and record it for the government, you should get the male version of Alexis, because men never listen. Well, maybe that's not so funny. But really, actually now, with smartphones and satellites and telephone intercepts, we actually know that from some of the ones who blew the whistle, by John Brennan, they really can monitor just about everybody now. So, but what George Orwellian did in this book, everything was a lie. Like the ministry of peace was really the ministry of war. The ministry of truth was really the ministry of lying propaganda. And it went on and on and on. You know, everything was the opposite of what you thought it should be. And at the beginning of the 20th centuries, they came up with euthanasia. Basically, it means good birth. And now, what they got out of all that was they said, well, we only want the people around who are good for the state. And what it meant was, and by some European countries that are very liberal do this to this very day, the elderly who aren't earning a lot of money anymore can be, even without their permission, the doctors can give them medications and send them on to the next world. I'm not making this up. That's euthanasia. And there are people who wanted to do that. Actually, it was in one of the health bills that passed in the 2000s, but they never really got it off the ground in America, where the oldest son could say to the doctor, you know, Dad's really getting a bad case of dementia, and in the back of his mind, I'd like to inherit the family farm or get the insurance policy. I'm not making this up. Send him on his way. Also, abortion, because, you know, babies in the womb are not going to be productive, at least for a couple years at least. Abort babies. Also, get rid of the people that you don't like. And by the way, Hitler got at least some of his intellectual justification for the Holocaust from the euthanasia American philosophy. He did, actually, quite a few ideas. And also something shocking. They took a survey of millennials, and do you know that the vast majority of millennials do not know what the Holocaust was? And the reason why that is important, if some evil dictator wanted to do it again, the fact that they don't know what it was and how bad it was would make it easier to do. I remember I used to always ask my students this: how many of you know the significance of the fall of the Berlin Wall? And they look at me like, the Berlin what? What? They had no idea the significance of the collapse of communism or how bad communism was. And these were college juniors. They at least had probably one college history course and several in high school. And I used to joke, I said, they don't teach you anything but crap in history nowadays. The students would chuckle. Unless, usually there'd be 2 out of a group of about 60 from private schools. They'd be the only ones that know. Public schools, and especially the St. Louis public schools, they didn't know anything. I know that's a biased statement, but that was my own finding. Those lies, actually I'll tell you another lie that the Nazis told. But it came from earlier European lies. They didn't invent all this stuff. They said the Jewish children used the blood of Christian babies to make their matzos for Passover. Now, as crazy as that lie is, that justified all kinds of pogroms against Jews. I mean, people can tell lies. Or the people that you don't like, you sterilize the mothers or you abort their babies. And actually, that's why abortion clinics are located in inner city neighborhoods to this day. People don't want to admit it, but that's what Margaret Sanger taught. And they're still doing it. Now, my point is lies have, and of course the Russians told all kinds of lies and did all kinds of terrible things to their people. Just a story you might find interesting. Stalin's second wife was a very attractive young woman, and I assume she married him for political power. I mean, that's the logic. And then when they started their controlled famine in the Ukraine and other places, and this is all historic stuff, between 2 to 7 million were starved. They don't know the number because it's so confusing, the numbers, and actually a lot more for Mao and China. Well, his wife in some public places complained to him about this. And he would burn her with cigarettes. And at one time when she embarrassed him about this, the next day she committed suicide with a pistol. Do you really believe that? I don't believe it. He had her killed by the secret police. I know you're thinking, Stalin wouldn't kill his own wife. These guys were evil. Yes, he would. At least I think he did. I suppose it could have been suicide, but I don't believe it. And actually stuff going on in Russia now with poisonings. They haven't changed. I mean, they're not a communist country now, but they haven't changed totally yet. And they told all kind of lies. Just one. I'll tell you one more lie that I thought was interesting. When the Americans invaded some of the islands close to Japan, as the U.S. Army was about to take it, the Japanese fought like fanatics, so it wasn't easy to take. A lot of the civilians jumped off cliffs into the water to drown themselves. Well, they got there and stopped a bunch of them. They said, well, why are you doing this? They said, well, our government said that if the Americans get here, they're going to rape and torture, and they elaborated on what they would do. That was a lie their government was telling so the people would fight more fanatically. And then they were shocked with how well the Americans treated POWs. But the only point I'm getting at, there are a lot of lies in this world which have allowed for a lot of evils. I guess I could now a couple more, but it might offend people. But believe me, like Hitler's Aryan lies, that they were better than Slavic people, that was the excuse for some of the horrors they did in Russia. And I know you're going to say, I can't tell the difference between the Aryans and the Slavics. It doesn't matter whether you could tell the difference or not. They thought they could. I'm just saying, But there are a lot of evil lies out there, a lot of evil lies in the world that have accounted for evil. And in 2 Thessalonians 2, 3 through 4, I noticed something in this verse that I never noticed before. 2 Thessalonians 2, 3 through 4. Let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will not come unless the falling away come first. So the first thing is people fall away from the truth. And then second, this great dictator, the beast, the emperor, whatever his exact title will be, he'll even take some holy titles like he's God on earth or something like that. Before he can come, there has to be a great falling away. And it's got to be more than just the worldwide Church of God falling away. Some more churches of God are going to fall away. But I believe the day will come when people will no longer believe in the Bible. That's one falling away. Many major churches, I won't name denominations because I don't offend anybody who might see this tape online later. Many great denominations will fall to what I call liberal theology, where they really believe in evolution. There's no real God. There's no real literal second coming of Jesus Christ. Some of them believe in critical race theory, which is a horrible Marxist, liberal, weird, anti-family, anti-God thing. There are a lot of crazy, and there are liberal preachers preaching it now in America. But the day will come when almost all churches will fall away from the truth. You know, if you look at something like evolution, people say, oh, that's just a minor thing. It really isn't a minor thing. When kids go to college and they hit them with that, once you believe that you are just an accident of nature, just a bunch of monkeys got lucky and you came out a little better and then you got a little better. By the way, the logic of genes don't support that. There's a bunch of scientists who don't like the idea of intelligent design were forced to choke on the words. They said, they looked at all the genome pairs that you need for all the different animals and for human beings and human intelligence. And they went down the odds of all those things happening accidentally. The number was so big you can't even write it. It's just not possible. It had to be controlled and planned. Plus, they said, well, what about when genes malfunction and you get a different kind of gene? Most of the time, that creates genetic disease and the organism gets weaker, not stronger. You know, you think, well, the gene will have some problems. It'll just change. They don't change for better. Normally, when you get a genetic or change, it's for the worse. And all those things like a totally complex computer program have to fit together. Well, but they don't tell their easily the misled students that. They still teach evolution. And the ones who fight it the hardest I saw at college are the biologists, because the truth is smacking them in the face every day about the complexity of the simple cell, and they don't want to see it. So they're fighting against it. It's evolution. It's all an accident. You are a cosmic accident. If that's the case, there are no absolute truths. There's no good or bad. And it's easy to get people to believe lies, myths, and people are falling away from the truth. And then comes the evil dictator. I'll read the rest of the verse. And the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition, verse 4, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped. And there's more about him in Daniel, but so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. I don't know exactly how that'll work, but we assume this beautiful temple will be built in Jerusalem in the near future. And he's going to say to himself, well, where do I want to be crowned God? Sure, he could do it in Berlin, Paris, or even Rome. But he's thinking, but where is the holiest place in the world? It's that temple where Christ himself taught. You know, you can see his logic. It's, you know, the whole world, it's the holiest place in the world. Next to us, the Dome of the Rock, and every, you know, big deal. He double crosses the Jews and puts himself in that temple with cameras on him, and his sycophants will bow. He is God on earth, whatever great titles they give him. And you're going to think, well, the people of the world know better than that, especially Christians and Catholics. They wouldn't worship a man. Are you sure about that? They'll have bought the big lie. You realize that Germany was the most educated country in Europe, and to some extent, they literally worshipped Hitler. It was like Hail Caesar, Heil Hitler. Same thing. So this idea that it can't happen, to some extent, using propaganda mechanism lies. Hitler was worshipped as a near God, Mao Zedong. Actually, Chinese students have to take a business course about Mao. And they have these little red books they carry with them, little red book of Mao, so like their Bible. Even though Mao was discredited in some ways, the Communist Party still thinks he's useful as a god. Don't ask me to explain it. I'm just telling you what seems to be the case. Stalin, as evil as he was until Khrushchev told the people the truth about him, was worshipped as a god. And it's scary stuff, isn't it? And you're thinking, well, people are too smart for that. And the younger generation is getting dumbed down, and dumbed down. You can see it in what they're teaching and what goes for education. I remember some of these shows will be Jesse Waters. He'll go to a beach where college students, young and healthy, not stupid or retarded, and he'll ask them, who did America fight to win their independence? And I really heard him say things, North Korea. You realize they have no idea. And they ask them about the Civil War, they ask them about this, all kinds of really basic questions. And you maybe get 1 out of 7 that knows the answer. And I'm not making up, the answers they give are like, are our college students that poorly educated? And it will get worse. Can't you sense it? The teachers union getting more power, and it will get worse. Those lies led to millions dying, 100 million dying plus in the communist empire. But more deception is coming. If you think the 20th century was a real hoot on misleading propaganda, it's going to get worse at some point in the future. Actually, the Bible said to be worse than it ever was before, and so just brace yourself. Well, before that last trumpet sounds, as you can see on a little sign here, before that last trumpet sounds, we're going to have to remain strong, biblically sound. Don't fall for any of the lies, or the Bible's all wrong. Men, the Jews just made it up, or whatever they say, or false, weird doctrines. We have to stay strong, sound, and if we do, we can celebrate the second coming of Christ, because when that happens, we will be elevated to be in God's family. We'll be, if you want to look at it, we'll be kind of spiritual royalty once we get there. 2 Thessalonians 2:6-8. 2 Thessalonians 2:6. And now you know what is restraining, that he may reveal in his own time. For the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. In other words, they're already deceiving people. Only he who now restrains will do so until he's taken out of the way. Whatever God is doing, God has some spiritual force or angels restraining Satan from going full bore with his deception. But at some point, God's going to pull that brick out of the way and let Satan go full force in deceiving and misleading the world. And many of us will probably live to see it. And then the lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord will consume with the breath of his mouth and destroy with the brightness of his coming. In other words, he will be destroyed after his 3.5 years of whatever bad things he does. But great delusion is coming. And it's coming when you read the rest of the chapter, because people do not love the truth. I actually believe this. Many of the press, when they told that story about the president not liking the military men, especially those that died or got wounded, I actually believe many of the members of the press knew that it was a lie. The guy who published it has, after 4 or 5 days of running it, has backed off the story. It wasn't really credible. But it's effective propaganda to pound the president 4 or 5 days, and they'll move on to another lie. I believe many of the reporters who reported knew that it was probably almost certainly a lie. They didn't care. Does that make sense? And many of the people who heard it probably, it's probably untrue, but I don't want him to get reelected, so I want to believe it. People don't care about the truth. Really, you can tell them some truth. I don't care. But, they don't love the truth. 1 Thessalonians 4:15. For this we say to you by the word of the Lord, that we who are alive and remain until the coming of the Lord will by no means precede those who are asleep. The ones that have passed away are sleeping. God's preserving them. He's taking care of them. The Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trumpet of God. That's what this day celebrates. The trumpet of God. And the dead in Christ will rise first, and we shall be caught up in the clouds and always be with the Lord. But to do that, we got to stay with the truth. And great deception's coming. And the thing I think about is, I remember in the old days in Worldwide, everybody was so sure that we knew all the truth and we were spiritually secure. And then when some bad people wormed their way into the top, because a certain person got a little senile, I won't go into all the details, it's irrelevant. We went to a church reunion, and a lot of people were there that I really thought a lot of when I was young. And they're buying the lie, like lock, stock, and barrel. And I couldn't believe it. I can't believe it. I won't mention the names, but they're buying the lie. So don't think that we could never buy the big lie. They're buying the big lie. And they may buy even bigger lies. Now, once you get into that slippery slope, they may buy even bigger lies in the future. I could see it. This joke is called the COVID-19 test. A new and easy test for the horrors of COVID-19 is doing its rounds, and people are talking about it. It's supposed to be simple, quick and positive, or whatever you think. So this guy says, take a glass and pour a decent amount of your favorite whiskey or liquor into it, and then see if you can smell it, because that's one of the symptoms that you can't smell. And then drink it. See if you can taste it. One of the symptoms of COVID, you lose your taste buds. So this guy says he drank it and tasted it, and so he knows he's currently free of the virus. So he said, I got to try this 7 more times during the evening to be sure I stay free of the virus. Then he wakes up the next morning. He says, well, I know that I don't have it because I tasted that whiskey all night long. Except now I got this throbbing headache. It was a horrible headache. I think I need to try one more time. Well, people love deceiving themselves, right? That's a good test to take. And I do think a lot of people don't mind deceiving themselves. They wouldn't mind if they won the election by cheating. Well, they don't care. Really, I believe a lot of them wouldn't care one bit. They were egging it on. But God places a value on people who appreciate the truth and who feel bad about lies and suffering and all the crime, especially going on in many urban centers. This is Ezekiel 9:4. The same thing is said in Revelation 7:3 and Revelation 9, but I'm going to read the first time it's mentioned in the Bible, Ezekiel 9:4. The Lord said to him, so this is God speaking through Ezekiel, go through the midst of the city, and the message is to angels, midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, put a mark on the foreheads of the men who sigh and cry for all the abominations that are done within the city. So God is saying to angels, go through the city, the people that really are upset by all the stealing and looting, immorality, corruption, lying propaganda, all that stuff, and suffering, put a mark on those people because they're not buying the lie, they're standing for truth. And when you read the context, same in the book of Revelation, God was bringing destruction on Jerusalem, but the people who had the mark in their forehead, we assume it's a spiritual mark, you can't see it, but the angels bringing the destruction can see it, those people would be spared. We want to be the people that are spared from the destruction to come because we sigh and cry for the lack of truth. We sigh and cry for all the bad things going on. We don't buy it and try to justify it. Here are politicians justifying bad behavior. Man, that's the last thing the thugs in the street need to hear. It's like music to their ear. I get to rob and loot, and it's a good thing. Literally, I've heard politicians make excuses for them. We need to emotionally feel the truth, look for justice, and feel bad when justice isn't there, and feel bad about all the falsehoods and evil, because it's outraging God. And I won't read the scripture, but in 1 Peter 5:4 it says, we'll receive a crown of glory when the chief shepherd returns. But to get that crown, we have to stay with the truth, believe the truth, and feel bad about all the lies that are being told. So stick with the truth. And remember, those marked by the angels who feel for the truth will be protected. 1 Corinthians 15:51. 1 Corinthians 15:51. This is called the resurrection chapter. Behold, I tell you a mystery. Verse 52. In the moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump, sort of just like that. The last trump. The trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. For this corruptible must put on incorruption. This mortal must put on immortality. We're going to be like Superman. Once we're in, you'll be bulletproof. Gravity won't limit you. You can fly off into heaven, check on stuff, come back and work on projects on earth that God has for us to work on or whatever. I mean, think about it. Forever young. Brethren, be steadfast. Now, this is Paul telling the Corinthians what they need to do to be ready when that trumpet sounds. Be steadfast. Be immovable. In other words, don't be swayed by false doctrines, false information. The news media, I think they got people panicked. Oh, the world's coming to an end. We're all going to die of COVID-19. They got them scared more so than they ought to be. Now, if you have underlying health conditions and you're elderly, you probably need to be a lot more careful. But most people, it's not that big a threat. I was shocked when the CDC finally released, after many months of silence, that a little over 9,000 people died of COVID alone in a country of 330 million. Now, the others had comorbidity. That means they were dying of something else. And COVID came along for the ride. I'm not taking it lightly, but anyway, that's what I mean. Don't let them move you. Always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that your labor is not in vain. All the things that we do for God's work and for God's church, we may be small, and it might seem like it's in vain, but it is not in vain. At that last trump, glory will be ours if we stay positive. Believe in Jesus' return. The trumpet will sound, we'll be raised to join the Messiah and save the world. The truth will reign for now, but for now, there's going to be a growing trend of people who don't care about the truth, and that includes the news media, academia, and scientists. People say, well, you can believe the scientists. No, you can't. Scientists are human. They have their own agendas, their biases, their lies. Just study a history of science. For a long time, let me give you one example. I wish I could remember. I learned a lot of them years ago, but I can't remember them now. But when the first lady who came out with a microscope and others, and they saw these microscopic animals, they called them wee beasties. A lot of scientists said, oh, that's not true. They don't exist. And even if they do, they have no real effect on us. And for years, scientists didn't believe that. Also, they believed the sun went around the earth, not the opposite, even though some scientists said the opposite. They believed the world was flat, even though Christopher Columbus and some scientists said, no, the earth is round. I could go back and back. Many times they were wrong. For many, many years they were wrong. Matter of fact, they didn't even know until I get the exact date. Surgeons didn't, because they weren't worried about microscopic germs, they didn't know to wash their, now Jewish doctors did because they remember all that stuff in the Bible. They didn't know to wash their hands between patients. And some common people learned it's more deadly to have a baby in a hospital where doctors going from patient to patient, not washing their hands thoroughly, spreading disease. In other words, if you think science can't be wrong, you just don't know much about the history of science. Eventually they get it straight, usually. It may take them a few centuries to figure it out. Matter of fact, the idea that microscopic animals are not dangerous, that is such a joke. Food poisoning, that's microscopic animals growing on your meat. You leave it out too long, and it'll kill you. And there's so many diseases spread by microscopic parasites and bacteria, and viruses are even smaller. They're really, you could even argue, is a virus alive? It's not a full one-cell animal. It's kind of the inner workings of the mechanism that runs your cell, all that DNA and RNA stuff, with its own little coating, obviously designed, I'm assuming, by God to take out the weak, or whatever different viruses take out the vulnerable. And I'm not saying it's a good thing to have all these germs, but they are powerful. Believe me, they're one of the most deadly things on earth, but you can't see them. Boy, were scientists wrong about that for a while. It took them a while to figure that out. All I'm saying is scientists have their biases. If you believe this, and if you tell scientists, well, if you support global warming, all these government grants and money are for you. And if you don't, well, we're going to really be hard on you. You don't think that biases their, quote, scientific thinking? Of course it does. They're as human as the rest of us, and maybe worse than a lot of people think. And when they say, I will follow the scientist when I make my decision. Well, the question is, which scientist will you follow? That's the real question. By the fact, you'll see this in trials. When there's some scientific issue involved in guilt or innocence, the lawyers on both sides can find experts to say two opposite things. And they both have medical degrees or PhDs in biochemistry. Believe me, we went to Ambassador College with one guy had a PhD in chemistry. And he was joking, but he was telling the truth. He says, a lot of these chemists are for sale. You do research for Hershey's chocolate, guess what you'll discover? If you do research for General Mills about their cereal's nutrition, guess what you'll put out? That cereal is good for you, now, regardless of all that sugar. And obviously that was true. Believe me, scientists are for sale. And you can find experts to say whatever you, I'm saying the lawyers would probably tell whatever you want them to say pretty much. If you pay them enough. No one cares about truth, especially the news media and opinion leaders. What do you think? Well, what about the opinion leaders, like this beautiful movie star, or beautiful radio talk show star, or this guy, he's just such a great media figure. He could be right, he could be wrong. And believe me, the last person you want telling you how to live your life are movie stars. There are exceptions, of course, but not all that many. You look at the private lives of movie stars, you're not going to be as impressed as you thought you would be. They just happen to have a good head of hair, right? And a photogenic face. By the way, do you know this one guy I was talking about movie stars? Many actors went to some drama school. He said they have less education than the average person, and they have less real job experience. They've been acting ever since they were 18 and 19 in, summer theater and that theater. They don't know anything. And all those scripts are written by great writers, and even the stunts they pull. You know, the lady is kicking and she's flipping ups and downs, she's kicking. Hope it doesn't offend anybody. That little skinny woman couldn't kick most men out. They have wires and harnesses and stunt people and camera tricks. One punch, it's like this one famous boxer said, but he said it in such a believable way, Mike Tyson. He said, people have all these strategies about how to fight me and win. He said, once I hit him once, because this guy hit like a lion, all that strategy goes out the window and like, anyway. But maybe I shouldn't say that. I don't. But you get the point. A lot of what you see in Hollywood is totally make-believe. They're not as strong, and even their photos are airbrushed, and they're probably, if you saw them without, and I'm including men too, without their makeup, hair artist, and other stuff, they wouldn't look as beautiful as you think they look. There may be some exceptions. I know some people are naturally beautiful, but anyway. And a lot of them have had plastic surgery. You'd probably be surprised. So all the opinion leaders that are out there on television, radio, and the movies, they don't know anything. Ezekiel 13. Now this scripture is an important one. Now obviously God, through Ezekiel, is talking about to the leaders of Israel before they went into captivity for the evil. But the principle, I believe, applies, like most Bible prophecy, applies to us too. Ezekiel 13, 3-6. Woe to the foolish prophet, prophets who follow their own spirit and see nothing. Notice, they're really not in touch with God. This is their own mind. O Israel, your prophets are like foxes in the desert. You've not gone up into the gaps to build a wall for the house of Israel and to stand in the battle on the day of the Lord. They've envisioned futility and false divination, saying, thus says the Lord, but the Lord has not sent them, yet they hope that their word may be confirmed. Now, they hope their advice is good advice, but their advice was not good advice. Like Jeremiah once told, the prophets were telling the people of Judah, when he was telling them, you better repent or God's going to let bad things happen to us. The false prophets, and there were a lot of them, Jeremiah was very much outnumbered, they said, it's all going to work out well. It's going to be wonderful. And even the ones that are prisoners, they'll come back home and it'll be wonderful. Jeremiah said, it'd be nice if that were so, but he says, have you ever heard of God sending prophets to give good news? Actually, if you look at the Bible, that isn't true. God sends, and I believe this, there may be an exception that Jeremiah didn't think of. Now, God has complimented particular people like Daniel later in life, said he loved him. But generally, when God sends a prophet to the nation of Israel or others, he never sends a prophet saying, you're doing so well. I'm so happy with you. I'm going to pour more and more blessing. You're so wonderful. That just doesn't happen. When God sends a prophet, it's usually, you better repent or else. And you read all of them, and you'll see how Jeremiah's statement was very true. It's very true. But the false prophets they tell you what you want to hear. I call it itching ears. Paul even warned about itching ears. Tell them what they want to hear, not the truth. Tell them what they want to hear. Let me give you a knucklehead example. As disorder gets higher and higher, the elites, they're very liberal, very smart, were voting to defund the police. You talk about knucklehead. That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. And now in some cities, including Minneapolis, wait a minute, what's going wrong here? Like a burglar breaks into one of the city council ladies' houses, and she says to the burglar, you better put down that knife and put down my stuff. A social worker is coming here to talk to you. That's about how crazy they're going to reimagine police by having others, not police with guns, but other people straighten the criminal out. Literally, they said crazy. And I've got too much privilege. Yeah, I got too much stuff. Give it to the criminal. It's crazy. Matthew 23. Woe to you, scribes, Pharisees, and hypocrites, for you're like a whitewashed tomb. It appears beautiful outwardly, but inside are full of dead men's bones and uncleanness. In other words, a lot of what false teachers teach, it sounds good. Like if you read, although Karl Marx was a horrible person, his personal life was awful. But the things he said about we'll all share equally, it sounds good. It just doesn't work. Believe me when I tell you there's plenty of history of communism in all kinds of countries. It doesn't work. It just sounds good. Opinion leaders have been out there telling people, one of them said, well, there's nothing wrong with looting and burning. These stores are insured. One, that is stupid in several reasons. One, if you burn and loot, some people are going to get killed in more ways than one. But do you realize that even if it goes just the way nobody gets really hurt, insurance can't replace everything. But even if they do have insurance, two problems. If a whole lot of places are damaged, see, my old boss, Earl McDaniel, says people used to think when they tried to defraud Sears that insurance was like a pot of gold in heaven. It opens up and it drops down from heaven. No. Insurance just means all the policyholders bear the cost. Well, if you loot and burn, say, $10 billion worth of stuff in America, the insurance companies just plow that into the cost of insurance, and they raise the insurance on all the businesses and private companies and people who buy car insurance and home insurance. The whole country pays more. It hurts the economy, hurts everybody. But they literally tell them, and I heard several leaders tell these young thugs, yeah, there's nothing wrong, you deserve it. That's what they told them. Loot and burn and steal. The thugs must have, man, this is wonderful. I can loot, burn, I wanted to do that, and now I'm in the right. And I'm not making this up. Their opinion leaders were on TV. I saw myself say such unbelievable things. And a lot of young people have no real moral training from their parents. A lot of them don't have good fathers. And they're now telling some young people it's okay to attack the police. We see how that's working out, don't you? And by the way, if the police aren't safe, that means you and I aren't safe. Think about it. If the police aren't safe, they call it the Ferguson effect. The police just pull back. You call the police, well, what neighborhood do you live in? Actually, I know this this is a real case. They called an ambulance for somebody, and the lady said, what neighborhood are you in? And they told the neighborhood, we're not coming there. I'm sorry. I could give you more details later. But the point I'm getting at is the people, and especially the poor people, are in danger. This is bad advice being brought down. Many of these cities are going to collapse. When you read further into the description of Ezekiel, he talked about the false prophets are like putting in mortar that won't work. And the brick wall will collapse. That's how Ezekiel put it. Well, these false teachings they're teaching a lot of young people, if they're applied, cities will collapse. Literally collapse. They're talking about the greatest city of America, New York, maybe collapsing. Maybe depends on the neighborhood. But I don't know, I'm told half the apartments are vacant. People are getting out of New York City. They're running for their lives. Now, maybe they can turn that back around. I won't say they can't, but and Christ criticized the Pharisees because they were pious, like socialists. The stuff they say sounds good, but it doesn't work. We have to stay positive, stay with the truth. And in the next 10 days, we should focus on being humble, repentant, and seeing the truth about ourselves. In other words, seeing ourselves accurately, because that's the real truth that counts, seeing yourself accurately and trying to get in a more repentant spirit as you approach the Day of Atonement and into the Feast of Tabernacles. You don't want a false righteousness like the church in Revelation 3:15. This is my last scripture, Revelation 3:15 and 17. I know your works, that you are neither cold nor hot. I wish you were cold or hot. So then, because you're lukewarm, neither cold or hot, I will vomit you out of my mouth. Because you say, I am rich, and have become wealthy, meaning spiritually rich, and have need of nothing. You're doing so well, you don't have need for any great improvement. God rarely tells people they don't have need for improvement. This is not the kind of thing God tells people. You're so wonderful, you have no need for improvement. God doesn't say that kind of thing. And do not know that you're wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked, meaning spiritually speaking. They were bad news. So we need to see ourselves clearly, and we'll pass out some stuff that may help us evaluate ourselves. Stay humble. Stay with the truth. And if we do that, when that trumpet sounds, we'll become the younger brother of Jesus Christ and be spiritual royalty.